Hey, I'm Peter, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, Waking from the Fire. Have you ever felt like there's something wrong, but you just don't know what it is? Have you ever felt just so angry at someone that they did something to you and you just can't believe that they did it? Have you ever felt judgmental that everyone you see and whatever you hear is just annoying to you, or you lose motivation? Have you ever felt that you just can't do this anymore, but you don't know what this is? Well, you're not alone and you're in the right place. I want to talk to you about, and I want to read an excerpt from my upcoming memoir, Waking from the Fire, about hitting bottom. And I didn't know what that was when I went through it. Now, looking back, I can see what it is. But basically, I got to a place, and from the outside, it looked like I was fine. It looked like I was successful. And that's what a lot of us do. We have perfectionism or imposter syndrome. You probably have heard about these things. But inside, something's wrong. So no matter what we accomplish, it's never enough, or there's always something missing, or maybe we think we're being a phony through it all. So let me read to you an excerpt from my memoir, and then I'll speak to you on the other side of this. This is from chapter 21, Hitting Bottom. As I share more memories with Bella, she stops me, shaking her head. Dad, how has your childhood not affected you more? That confuses me. I don't know how to answer because until now, I thought it hadn't. After 4 years of what could be tormenting work, for the first time, I see what Bella sees. As I write for my 5-year-old self, it's plain as day. As a little boy, I figured out a way to escape long before the fire. Besides hiding from my father in plain sight, head down, never looking him in the eyes, tiptoeing out of the room when he walked into it. As I lied awake in my bunk bed at night, I imagined being famous on stage, like Elvis, adored by millions, but mostly pretty girls and a handful of envious boys. It made me feel special, like I rarely did, taking me to large arenas with screaming fans and huge spotlights. Years later, I'll learn this is a salvation fantasy, a way to dissociate from a situation you want to escape from, but can't. There was one problem with my fantasy. Besides trying to start a band in our basement, my brother on drums, he was good, me on guitar, I was not, and my mother telling me my voice sounded like Elvis when I was a prepubescent in the 70s, I didn't have any musical abilities. But I continued to fantasize about fame, and if I could attain it, people would love me. Then something would happen that I didn't understand. Whenever I got the attention I craved, I'd want it to stop. 33 years later, I'll understand why. Being seen in a dysfunctional family could get you hurt. And though I craved admiration and acceptance, I didn't believe I deserved it. My becoming almost famous started after an obscure childhood. I'd first appear in the papers for hitting home runs in Little League. Next, because of my father's public death. Then, when I got a scholarship, and again years later when I appeared on TV and in print and online media through sheer will, and when I'm being judgmental in lieu of talent. I didn't become a rock star, but worked up to being introduced as a health guru. As one human resources director introduced me, he's the Tony Robbins of health. I spoke passionately about nutrition, exercise, and motivation to employees at Goldman Sachs, the largest financial institution in the world, was flown and broadcast internationally by the third biggest law firm on the planet, and was in talks to speak at Lehman Brothers the month they financially imploded in the crash of 2008, ironically, to motivate their employees. I willed myself to get on QVC, the largest TV shopping channel in the world, selling a fitness product I had manufactured in China. By rough estimate, I had the adoration of not millions, but handfuls of nice folks in at least 25 out of the 50 states in the US, including Alaska, with smatterings in Europe and Asia. I had manifested my fantasy of being on stage. But I learned it came with a price. Unfulfilled, I'll realize later, fame wasn't the type of notice I needed. It had less to do with stardom and more to do with fatherdom. Because something still eluded me, even having achieved a modicum of celebrity and the appearance of wealth, After speaking to a large crowd in New York City or LA, I'd go back to my hotel room, sometimes at the Four Seasons, order room service, eat copious amounts of mediocre food, and pass out watching crappy TV because I was depressed, not chemically, but spiritually. And because I'm being honest, before going to bed, I'd participate in more soul-depleting activities. Lying in my childhood bed at night all those years ago, I thought being rich and famous would make me happy, and all of my problems would go away. So that's what I set out to be. The problem was I didn't really know what my problems were. While faking my way through what I secretly believed was pseudo-success, I'd never get a grasp on what was wrong with me or what I really wanted. I always felt like something was missing, and with everything I accomplished, I actually felt worse. What others saw as success, I perceived as failure. Why? Because I felt like a phony through all of it, thinking, I hope they don't realize I'm not special. And I never felt like I fit in anywhere. Because of this work, I'll learn that's called imposter syndrome. The singer-songwriter Lana Del Rey wrote, "It takes everything you ever wanted and losing it all to know what true freedom is." I can't say I got everything I ever wanted. I did achieve a fringe frame, made enough money over a couple of years to situate my children in an upper middle class suburb, though I struggled financially through every year of it, paid off one large school loan in a lump sum, and would be recognized as a quasi-celebrity while out a couple of times a year. Hey, aren't you Peter Kay? You spoke at my company last year. Then it all collapsed. My business, my marriage, my life. I still had 3 wonderful kids, and they had a good mother, but I was lost. The economy's changed and companies aren't paying for health and wellness anymore, I'd say, ashamed, initially blaming it on the 2008 stock market crash. Frank helps me accept there's some truth in that. Then there was the hurtful lawsuit by that fucking cunt, as my friend from physical therapy school referred to her. He was talking about a lawyer in California, already receiving disability checks, who sued me claiming she became disabled and couldn't ever work again because a piece of plastic from an exercise band I had manufactured in China cut her knuckles while she was exercising. The attorney hired by my insurance company assured me, "Don't worry, Peter, this is ridiculous. The case will be thrown out. She's a nut." When she won $1.8 million in damages, my attorney shrugged. That's the way the system works. During the deposition, the plaintiff's attorney turned to me and asked, "Why would you sell my client a product that you knew might hurt her?" That stabbed my heart. Afterwards, he said, "No hard feelings. It's just personal. It's not personal. It's just business. By the way, I love your website and what you do as a health coach. Can I email you sometime with some health questions?" Shaking my head, I asked, "Are you serious?" He looked confused. Because I lost my income, I fell behind on my bills. My credit rating dropped to below 500 and my house was in pre-foreclosure. I was disillusioned and despondent, thinking, why do I fail at everything I try? And why is everyone having a better life than me? What I didn't understand then was what happened to me was inevitable. Finally, after years of struggling, while not knowing why, the childhood I thought hadn't affected me finally caught up with me. There's a line in Jane Eyre where Edward says to Jane, "You must be tenacious of life, for having endured years in an oppressive orphanage." I was living that sentiment. Feeling emotionally fatigued, I fatefully fell into what 12-step programs call a bottom. Hopeless and often angry and resentful, I found a therapist, and though I wasn't an alcoholic, he referred me to a 12-step program for children of alcoholics. He and the program saved my life. He was the first person to help me understand, "Peter, your father was a sick man." Until then, I thought I was the problem. Unfortunately, often, I still do. When I look back to my childhood, it will be easy to point the finger at my father. But what surprises me is my kind, quiet, overprotective mother will be accountable as well. It won't be about blame, but understanding what happened to my parents in Greece, that they passed down to their children in America, that I hoped I didn't pass down to mine. Therapy and group meetings helped me make sense of what I could never figure out on my own. First, that there was a hole, and second, why I couldn't fill it. Then, On the verge of turning 50, the age my father decided he couldn't live anymore, I'd be lying awake in bed at 3 a.m., anxious about something, when a narrative started writing in my head. I was remembering my childhood. Visions of knives, beatings, and a deadly fire appeared, oddly through the eyes of a frightened 3-year-old. I soon learned why I had to change the narrator's age, otherwise the nightmares would never stop. I was compelled to sit down one day and type my thoughts, and haven't stopped since. Truthfully, I couldn't stop. The voices in my head spoke all the time, during push-ups at the gym, while treating my patients, driving with my kids. I couldn't ignore them, though I tried, because often an overwhelming sadness consumed me, making me want to stay in bed, skip work, and avoid people. I learned I was experiencing unexpressed grief from childhood, often misdiagnosed as depression and treated unsuccessfully with medical interventions. I learned the only way out was through. Driving down the parkway, suddenly a scene from my father's funeral would play in my head. I tried to wordsmith the perfect sentence in my mind as I missed exits, then quickly pulled over, opened my laptop, and wrote before the sentences disappeared. Soon it became evident, getting the entire story out with as much honesty and detail as possible would be the only way I could someday climb out of the hole I was stuck in. Suddenly, emotions I didn't know I had kept down started fighting to come out. One of them was anger, not the healthy, expressive kind, but the destructive kind. If unleashed, I didn't think I could control. Sometimes I felt like I wanted to kill someone with my hands, leading to visions of going to prison for murder. It scared me, but the more I wrote, the more I realized there was one person I wanted to hurt: my father. I knew getting the anger out was a necessary part of healing, but I was angry that I was angry. I hated the feeling in me and the confusion it created. It frustrated and worried me, leading me to think I might never feel better. Trying desperately to be happy, I'd often feel anger and sadness from the grieving process, something I told I must let myself experience to recover. When well-meaning people told me, let it go, I thought, for 48 years, I believed there was something wrong with me. It's only been several years of trying to change that belief. You can't let go of something you don't know you're holding. My program says about the time to heal, it takes what it takes. Thankfully, the anger started shifting to the healing, motivational kind, fueling my determination not to pass this dysfunction onto my children. Surprisingly, though it hurt, I often looked forward to the work because it helped me make sense of why I felt and did the things I did. But sometimes the writing didn't feel right. Slowly, through many edits, I went back and removed superfluous language and dramatic renditions because I realized often I was writing for you, the reader, to try and impress you by magnifying my traumas to justify my problems. When I did that, it interfered with the healing. So I'd go back and replace words like devastated with sad, using the words my 5-year-old self would understand to tell my story authentically. I also learned through therapy in my program to keep the focus on myself. Blaming or judging anyone else, including my father, would only hurt me. And it became evident that it was essential to report what happened as accurately as possible, without emotion, as a child would. Like a good reporter, they state the facts, then let them speak for themselves. Doing that released the emotions naturally, like I was reading about some other child being hurt, making me feel the pain for someone else that I was never allowed or able to feel for myself. My instincts as a parent allowed me to experience healthy anger, making me compelled to protect that child being me. I knew my writing was authentic when I shared excerpts with friends and strangers, and they wrote back, though I'm not a violent person, I want to hurt your father. Then something else interfered with my progress. When I shared my writing, some friends would say, you're being too hard on yourself. That made me doubt myself again, a learned trait I can hate about myself. I learned my self-doubt is deeply ingrained default. While speaking to a nurse about making an appointment for my son, when she asked his birth date, then said, are you sure that's his birth date? I'll have to check my notes, making me angry at myself for doubting knowing my own son's birthday. Later, turning off my laptop, my phone, and all social media, sitting alone in a quiet room because my program recommended it, I'd think, no, I don't think I'm being too hard on myself. I think I'm just being honest. Although it's painful, self-honesty has been essential for my recovery. My 12-step program states parents abandon their children when they fail to praise or recognize a child's true effort to please the parent. I was oblivious of this fact of my childhood. Then I read, when we reach the age our parents had their breakdown, and our children are at the age when we suffered our worst traumas, it can feel like we're going to go insane. I related to that and have observed some of my patients, clients, and friends struggling in the same way. Unfortunately, some of them don't make it, taking their lives slowly through a harmful lifestyle or quickly by suicide, like my father. Still, sometimes the work seemed pointless, making me think again, why does everyone seem to be having a better life than me? And no one cares about what I'm writing. Deciding to quit for the 100th time, a small voice kept whispering for me to continue, even after a literary agent sent a 2-sentence rejection that made me question the value of my entire life. Thankfully, I soon learned who that little voice was and started paying attention to it more and more. At those times, hopeless of ever feeling better, having lost focus of my purpose, I confessed frustration to Frank, my therapist. He'd suggest other therapies like EMDR. Skeptical but desperate, I'd play along. Then, during one of those sessions, when I didn't expect it, I came face to face with a young boy alone on a curb in his Little League baseball uniform, waiting for me, sitting where his father had left him 39 years before. So I couldn't quit, even when I tried, because I knew I couldn't walk away from that little boy again. I realized he'd stay stuck on that curb unless I sat down next to him and listened. Slowly, over time, I took that little boy's hand and gently helped him off the curb, walked him up the stairs and out of the basement, and lifted him out of his father's blue van. And because a therapist who read an excerpt suggested it, sat on the grass of my childhood yard with him in the warm sun, promising him, "You're safe now. I'll never leave you again." Writing about all this has been therapeutic. That surprised me because I thought that was just a cliche. I wrote because I felt compelled to write, and eventually the story came out. Then, sharing it with Frank was essential to my healing. I'd write, we'd discuss it, and with his guidance, I'd heal the wounds one by one, making the hole smaller. His knowledge of dysfunctional families helped me understand what really happened and how it held me hostage. My recovery would have been impossible without this insight. For years, I concluded my problems were due to my inherent flaws, driving me deeper into my dysfunction, taking me to the edge of my sanity. I can only speculate my father had once been here too. His solution was fire. I had to do better for my children. Sharing early drafts of my writing on my blog and social media, besides the unexpected support, some readers became concerned. They wrote, "Why do you do this to yourself?" And "I pray you are okay," almost begging me to leave the past behind. To those who share their love and concern, I assure you, though I still struggle, I know I'll be okay. To write honestly, I had to take myself back there, the curb, the van, the basement, the hospital room. It was essential to my recovery to authentically feel the emotions I was not allowed to or able to feel when the traumas occurred. Because my father was dead, writing as though he was still in the room, and I was that scared little boy in the corner, was the best way I had to accomplish that. I'll admit, often, walking away from my laptop in tears after a writing session, people staring on the street, the danger and fear followed me around the corner and into my car with me. A friend reminded me, "Make sure to leave it behind. You don't have to carry it with you." It took some work, but I've been able to come back to the present, to my children, to my life, most of the time. My recovery took 4 years and counting of working 12 steps, attending weekly meetings, weekly therapy sessions, daily readings, daily communications with 12-step friends, and writing. I had previously spent over 15 years and $25,000 going to self-help seminars, buying books, listening to audio programs, and doing what the self-help gurus recommended. I even created a self-help business of my own. But for me, after hitting my bottom, a free, anonymous 12-step program, a good therapist, authentic relationships, time, and a willingness to heal were what I needed. During this journey, I also had to face the darker side of humanity, exploring deeply my father's words and actions, eventually confronting the question, are there evil people or just evil acts? One client, someone I went to high school with, reached out to me in my role as a health coach and asked, can you help me lose weight? She told me she weighed over 300 pounds. When I asked her, why do you think you can't lose weight? She replied with a common misbelief I have heard too often from clients in my 25 years as a health coach. I'm lazy and I lack willpower. When I asked, how do you feel about yourself? She said, honestly, like I'm not worth it. When we dug deeper, she connected where that belief came from. She confessed, my father would tell me, once I fucked your mother in her asshole and you came out. Before this writing, I could think there was a special place in hell for a father who spoke that way to his daughter. Now I think, I wonder what happened to him when he was a child. Not to justify his behavior, but to understand where it came from. Through understanding, we can change, uncover our long dormant true selves, separate with love from our past or present tormentors, and treat the children in our lives better, including our own inner children. During what would be our last session, my friend from high school, referring to what her father told her, her eyes full and spilling onto her cheeks, leaned in and quietly confessed between sobs, you see, Peter, I really am, literally, a piece of shit. Tragically, she carried that belief with her to her end. She died a few weeks later from complications of obesity, the result of trying to fill with food the hole where her father's love should have been. In addition to these heartbreaking revelations, when I shared early drafts with family and close friends, I was surprised by two reactions. The first was, you're courageous and brave. A high school friend wrote, I admire your dedication to bettering yourself and the strength you have doing it. The compliments were nice to hear, but confused me. I didn't and still don't see myself as brave or courageous. That's not feigned humility. I felt and can still feel like a coward. When Frank refers to my journey as that of a phoenix rising from the ashes, I desperately want to emulate that simile, but honestly struggled doing so. Because I pretended to be perfect up to now, when I started sharing my insecurities, I worried people would see me as weak and pathetic, thinking, why was I so affected by my father in my childhood? What's wrong with me? Someone I respect said, that's what makes you strong, the fact that you're unaware of your strength. Again, I resisted the compliment, grudgingly, because I wished I could feel what she saw. The truth is, the work I did because I felt I had no other choice. It was either find out what happened, heal, and move on, or continue to live in misery, go insane, and do something to hurt others or myself, like my father did. The other responses I wasn't expecting were, I can relate to this, and I want to tell you something about my father. And though our childhoods were different, I feel the same. That's when I realized sharing my story might help others. The unexpected responses compelled me to write as truthfully as possible because maybe someone would read this and it might help a child praying in the back of their father's blue van, or sitting alone on a curb in their Little League uniform, or hiding in the corner of their childhood basement. I hope that's true. Thanks for listening to that. And as I read it, I think I could not have done this alone. This meaning, understand what was wrong with me. First, that there was a hole. And second, why I couldn't fill it. So many of us are subconscious about this, or it's in our unconscious, like me. I just knew that there was something wrong. On the outside, I looked fine. On the inside, I was suffering. It took a good therapist, a 12-step program, and journaling. I happened to write a memoir, but you don't have to write a memoir to heal. And it changed my life. I can sit here telling you authentically my relationships with my children are 100% better. I always loved them, but I never allowed myself to connect with them in such a deep, authentic way as I do now. They know my past. My two older daughters at least have read my memoir and really are compelled by it. They keep asking me for more chapters as I edit it. And I'm happy about that because they can understand where I came from. And my daughter did something that's just absolutely remarkable. She wrote an alternate reality. She read about my father and my childhood and some of the terrible things that happened to us. And she was able to see the good in my father. And she wrote an alternate reality that is just beautiful. I'll share that with you sometime soon. So what I want to leave you with is if you feel any of these feelings, emotions, you're not alone. And my recommendation to you would be to reach out. You can send me an email. What I also encourage you to do is to find a good therapist. Now, you may have worked with a therapist in the past. They might, if it didn't help, they just might not have been the right therapist, or it might not have been the right time for you. I wouldn't give up on that. Frank, my therapist, has been invaluable for me. I wish I could share him with you, but he's just one person and he's semi-retired. But I know if Frank is out there, then there's another great therapist out there, and I would keep searching. And I would explore a 12-step program. Like I said in my piece, was not an alcoholic, but I benefited immensely from a 12-step program for children from dysfunctional or alcoholic or addicted homes. That might help you as well. Another resource that's incredibly helpful is Gabor Mate, Gabor Mate. He's a doctor who's just so versed in childhood trauma. And there's a new documentary that features him called The Wisdom of Trauma that I highly recommend that you check out. And I know talking about this stuff can be tough, but if we don't talk about it, then we don't ever dig any deeper, reveal what's really going on. And then on the other side of it, feel better, have better relationships, not just with the people in our lives that we love or want to attract, but better relationships with food, with any addiction that we might have to porn, gambling, alcohol, drugs, binge watching TV, social media, etc. That stuff is all a result of trying to fill this hole. We're trying to feel better. Those are not the problems. What the issue is getting to the core of the hurt so that you can repair and heal that, like I did with my father. I now forgive my father. I never thought I had to forgive him. I never knew I was angry with him until I started this work. That's how deep and subconscious and unaware I was. And maybe you are too, or people in your life are too. So I hope you take a step towards your healing. The fact that you're here encourages me to say that you probably are. Until next time, I'm Peter.